You know what's interesting? Most guys think that showing more interest is the answer. They believe that if they just text more, compliment more, make themselves more available, she'll finally see how much they care. And honestly, it makes sense on paper. If you like someone, shouldn't you show it? Shouldn't effort be rewarded? But here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody really wants to hear. The more interest you show too early, the less interested she often becomes. And before you close this video thinking it's some kind of game or manipulation tactics, stay with me. Because what I'm about to share is rooted in decades of psychological research, studies on human behavior, and observable patterns that show up across cultures and generations. This isn't about playing hard to get. It's not about being cold or pretending you don't care. It's about understanding something fundamental about human psychology that applies to all of us, men and women alike. We're wired to value things that feel rare, uncertain, or earned. It's the same reason a limited edition item feels more valuable than something mass-produced, even if they're identical in quality. The same principle applies to attention, availability, and romantic interest. When something comes too easily, our brains instinctively assign it less value. That's not opinion, that's psychology. Now, I know this might sound harsh or even unfair. You might be thinking, so I'm supposed to hide how I feel, pretend I'm not interested? No. That's not what this is about. What we're going to explore in this video is why excessive attention creates the opposite effect of what you want, how it changes the way someone perceives you, and most importantly, what actually works instead. Because here's the thing. Genuine interest is attractive. Confidence is attractive. But desperation, over-availability, and loss of self-respect, those are universally unattractive, and they signal something deeper that triggers a psychological response you need to understand. So if you've ever wondered why that girl you were texting every day suddenly went cold, or why being the nice guy who does everything right doesn't seem to work, this video will give you the real answers. Not pickup artist nonsense, not mind games, just honest, research-backed explanations about human nature and what you can do differently. Let's dive in. Section 1. The scarcity principle. Why we value what's hard to get. Let's start with something you've probably experienced without even realizing it. Think about the last time you wanted something, maybe concert tickets, a limited edition sneaker drop, or even a restaurant reservation that was hard to get. The harder it was to obtain, the more you wanted it, right? That's not coincidence. That's your brain responding to scarcity, and it's one of the most well-documented principles in psychology. In 1975, researchers Stephen Warchell, Jerry Lee, and Akinbi Adewole conducted a fascinating study. They gave people cookies in two different jars. One jar had 10 cookies, the other had just 2. Same cookies, same taste, same everything. But here's what happened. People rated the cookies from the jar with only 2 as more desirable, more valuable, and even better tasting. Nothing about the cookies changed except their availability. This is the scarcity principle in action, and it doesn't just apply to cookies, it applies to people, attention, and romantic interest. When you make yourself completely available to someone, when you respond instantly to every text, when you rearrange your entire schedule just to see them, when you shower them with constant attention, you're essentially becoming the jar with 10 cookies. You're abundant, you're easy to access. And whether we like it or not, our brains are wired to place less value on things that are abundant and easily accessible. It's not personal, it's not cruel, it's just how human psychology works. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Robert Cialdini, one of the most respected psychologists in the field of influence and persuasion, explained this perfectly in his book, Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion. He showed that scarcity doesn't just make things more desirable, it actually triggers a fear of loss. When something is rare or potentially slipping away, we feel an urgency to secure it. But when something is always there, always available, always waiting for us, there's no urgency, there's no tension. There's no emotional pull that keeps someone thinking about you when you're not around. Think about it from a practical standpoint. When you text someone immediately every single time, what does that communicate? It tells them you're always free, always waiting, always thinking about them. And while that might sound romantic in theory, in practice, it creates a dynamic where you become predictable and, honestly, taken for granted. There's no mystery about whether you'll respond. There's no wondering what you're up to. You've essentially removed all the psychological ingredients that create attraction and intrigue. But let's be clear about something important. This isn't about playing games or being manipulative. This isn't about ignoring someone to make them chase you. That's immature and dishonest. What we're talking about is genuine scarcity that comes from having a full, interesting life. When you have your own goals, your own hobbies, your own friends, your own schedule, you naturally become less available. And that natural unavailability creates authentic scarcity, which in turn creates genuine interest. The research is consistent across the board. Studies in social psychology repeatedly show that people are more attracted to those who are selective with their attention rather than those who give it freely to everyone. It's why exclusivity feels special. It's why being chosen by someone who has options feels more meaningful than being chosen by someone who seems desperate for any attention at all. So the first thing you need to understand is this: your attention has value, but only if you treat it like it does. Section 2. Overinvestment signals low self-worth. Here's something that might sting a little, but it's important to understand. When you invest heavily in someone who hasn't invested much in you, you're not just being generous or showing how much you care, you're actually sending a message about how you see yourself. And that message is being received loud and clear, even if it's never spoken out loud. Let me explain what I mean. There's a concept in social psychology called reciprocity imbalance, and it's incredibly powerful in how we form impressions of others. When someone gives far more than they receive in any relationship, whether that's time, effort, attention, or emotional energy, it creates an uncomfortable imbalance. And here's the part most people don't realize. The person receiving all that excess attention doesn't just feel grateful. They start to wonder why you're willing to give so much for so little in return. And the conclusion they often reach, consciously or unconsciously, is that you don't value yourself very highly. Research from the field of behavioral economics supports this perfectly. Dan Ariely, a behavioral economist at Duke University, has shown through multiple studies that people assign value to things based partly on what others are willing to accept for them. If you're selling something for almost nothing, people assume it's not worth much. If you're giving away your time and attention freely without any reciprocation, people assume that time and attention isn't particularly valuable. It's harsh, but it's human nature. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. Robert Cialdini, one of the most respected psychologists in the field of influence and persuasion, explained this perfectly in his book, Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion. He showed that scarcity doesn't just make things more desirable, it actually triggers a fear of loss. When something is rare or potentially slipping away, we feel an urgency to secure it. But when something is always there, always available, always waiting for us, there's no urgency, there's no tension, there's no emotional pull that keeps someone thinking about you when you're not around. Think about it from a practical standpoint. When you text someone immediately every single time, what does that communicate? It tells them you're always free, always waiting, always thinking about them. And while that might sound romantic in theory, in practice it creates a dynamic where you become predictable and honestly taken for granted. There's no mystery about whether you'll respond. There's no wondering what you're up to. You've essentially removed all the psychological ingredients that create attraction and intrigue. But let's be clear about something important. This isn't about playing games or being manipulative. This isn't about ignoring someone to make them chase you. That's immature and dishonest. What we're talking about is genuine scarcity that comes from having a full, interesting life. When you have your own goals, your own hobbies, your own friends, your own schedule, you naturally become less available. And that natural unavailability creates authentic scarcity, which in turn creates genuine interest. The research is consistent across the board. Studies in social psychology repeatedly show that people are more attracted to those who are selective with their attention rather than those who give it freely to everyone. It's why exclusivity feels special. It's why being chosen by someone who has options feels more meaningful than being chosen by someone who seems desperate for any attention at all. So the first thing you need to understand is this: your attention has value, but only if you treat it like it does. Section 4. Evolutionary Psychology: The Biology Behind Attraction. Now we need to talk about something that might make you uncomfortable, but it's rooted in millions of years of human evolution. And it affects all of us, whether we like it or not. And before you think this is about justifying bad behavior or making excuses, stick with me. because understanding this will actually help you make better choices. From an evolutionary psychology perspective, humans developed mate selection strategies over hundreds of thousands of years. Research from evolutionary biologists and psychologists shows that both men and women evolved to look for certain signals that indicated a quality partner. For women, historically, one of those signals was resource security and social status. Not because women are shallow or materialistic, but because for most of human history, choosing a partner who could provide stability often meant survival for them and their children. Now, we live in a completely different world, but our brains still carry these ancient wiring patterns. Here's where it connects to overinvestment. When you constantly chase, when you drop everything for someone who hasn't earned that level of commitment, when you make yourself completely available regardless of how you're treated, you're inadvertently signaling low status and low value. And I need to be blunt with you here because too many men don't want to hear this. You're not being romantic. You're not being persistent. You're being desperate. And desperation has never been attractive to anyone, ever, in the entire history of human relationships. Studies in evolutionary psychology from researchers like David Buss at the University of Texas have shown that confidence, self-assurance, and social value are consistently rated as attractive traits across cultures. And here's the tough truth. Those traits are incompatible with behavior that screams, I have no other options. When you're texting someone 10 times for every one response, when you're always free whenever they finally decide to reach out, when you're willing to tolerate disrespect or disinterest just to keep their attention, you're not demonstrating any of those attractive qualities. You're doing the opposite. And let me tell you something that might wake you up. She notices. She absolutely notices that you have nothing else going on. She notices that you're always available because you've made her the center of your entire existence. She notices that you're willing to accept breadcrumbs of attention because you don't believe you deserve a full meal. And whether she consciously realizes it or not, her attraction decreases because you're displaying the exact opposite of the confidence and self-sufficiency that evolution has wired her to find appealing. Now, here's the evolutionary piece that really matters. Humans are attracted to mates who appear to have options and who are selective about their choices. This makes sense from a survival standpoint. If others value someone, there's probably a good reason. It's called mate choice copying, and it's been documented across numerous species, including humans. When you act like you have no options, like you're willing to take whatever scraps of attention come your way, you're working directly against this principle. But here's your wake-up call, and I need you to really hear this. You're not a victim of evolutionary psychology. You're not powerless here. The same biological principles that explain why desperation repels people also explain what actually works: confidence, self-assurance, and social value. These aren't just attractive traits. They're indicators of genuine mental and emotional health. Stop blaming women for not appreciating your constant attention. Stop acting like you're being punished for caring too much. The reality is simpler and harsher. You're being avoided because your behavior signals insecurity, lack of options, and low self-worth. And those signals trigger biological responses that decrease attraction. Evolution doesn't care about your intentions. It responds to your behavior. The good news? You can change your behavior starting right now. Build a life you're genuinely proud of. Develop interests that matter to you. Create standards for how you expect to be treated. And stop giving maximum effort to people who give you minimum respect. Section 5. Finding in the balance what actually works. So after everything we've discussed, you might be wondering, what's the actual solution here? Because if showing too much interest pushes people away, but being cold and distant is dishonest and manipulative, where's the middle ground? Let me give you the research-backed answer that actually works in real life. The key is something psychologists call responsive and selective attention. Research from the University of Rochester found that people are most attracted to partners who are responsive to them specifically, but not overly eager or available to everyone. In other words, you should show genuine interest when you're together, be present in conversations, and demonstrate that you care, but you should also have boundaries, standards, and a life that doesn't revolve entirely around them. This creates what researchers call earned intimacy, where closeness develops naturally through mutual investment rather than one-sided pursuit. Here's what this looks like in practice. When someone reaches out to you, respond with genuine engagement. Not immediately every single time, but in a reasonable time frame that shows you have other things going on, but you're happy to hear from them. When you're spending time together, be fully present and authentic. Show interest in who they are, ask meaningful questions, and create real connection. But here's the critical part. Don't abandon your own life in the process. Keep your gym schedule, maintain your friendships, pursue your career goals, honor your commitments. This isn't playing games. This is being a complete human being with a full life. Studies on relationship satisfaction consistently show that the healthiest relationships are between two individuals who maintain their independence while choosing to share their lives together. The key word there is choosing. When you make yourself constantly available, you're not choosing, you're clinging. And there's a massive psychological difference between those two things. Choice implies options and agency. Clinging implies desperation and fear. People can sense that difference even if they can't articulate it. There's also important research on what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement. This is when rewards come unpredictably rather than constantly, and it's one of the most powerful drivers of sustained interest and behavior. Now, I'm not suggesting you intentionally manipulate someone with inconsistent attention. That's toxic. But what I am saying is that natural variation in your availability, created by genuinely having other priorities and commitments, actually maintains interest better than constant predictable availability. When someone knows you're not always free, the times you do make yourself available become more valuable and appreciated. And here's the framework that works. Match their investment level, especially in the early stages. If they're texting you once a day, don't text them 10 times. If they make plans with you once a week, don't try to see them every single day. Pay attention to the effort they're putting in and mirror it with perhaps slightly less intensity. This creates balance and demonstrates self-respect. As mutual interest grows and they begin investing more, you can naturally increase your investment too. But that growth should be mutual and gradual, not one-sided and desperate. And here's the most important part. Be willing to walk away. Research on negotiation and social dynamics consistently shows that the person who cares least has the most power. I'm not saying you should pretend not to care, that's dishonest, but you should genuinely be okay with walking away from situations where you're not being valued, where effort isn't reciprocated, where respect isn't present. That willingness to walk away isn't a tactic, it's a reflection of actual self-worth. And ironically, that authentic self-worth is one of the most attractive qualities you can possess. The balance isn't complicated. Be genuinely interested, but not desperate. Be available, but not always. Be kind, but not a pushover. Be invested, but not more than they are. Show you care, but show you care about yourself first. Conclusion. So let me leave you with something that might challenge the way you've been thinking about all of this. Here's the controversial truth that nobody wants to say out loud. The reason women ignore you when you show too much interest isn't actually about them at all. It's about you. And I know that's hard to hear, but stay with me because this is actually empowering, not discouraging. We spend so much time analyzing their behavior. Why did she stop responding? Why did she lose interest? What did I do wrong? That we completely miss the real issue. The real issue is that you're seeking validation and worth from someone else's attention instead of building it within yourself. When you're constantly chasing, over-investing, and making someone the center of your entire existence, you're not actually interested in them as a complete person. You're interested in what their acceptance would say about you. You're using their attention as evidence that you're valuable, that you're worthy, that you're enough. And that's not attraction, that's dependence. Here's what the research on self-determination theory tells us. Humans have three basic psychological needs: competence, autonomy, and relatedness. When you abandon your autonomy and make your entire emotional state dependent on someone else's responses, you're violating a fundamental psychological need. And people can sense that. They can sense when your interest in them is actually just a desperate need for validation. And it's deeply unattractive because it's not really about them, it's about filling a void in yourself. The most attractive version of you isn't the one who cares less or plays games,